Have you just got the DJI Avata 2? And when using real view picture-in-picture, you can't see the drone feed in the top left corner? Or when you are trying to use the new easy acro mode and you push the joystick, nothing happens? Well, today I would like to share with you 10 things you may not know about the DJI Avata 2. Let's jump right in. Now, real view picture-in-picture is an exciting new feature on the DJI Goggles 3. Using the two cameras on the front of the goggles, whenever you tap on the left side of the goggles themselves, the view will change from being able to see what the drone sees to being able to see through the goggles. And this allows you to see your surroundings without having to take the goggles off. But by default out of the box, whenever you change to this view, you won't be able to see what the drone is seeing at the same time. The entire view will change to the feed from the two cameras on the goggles themselves. So to make this feature a whole lot more useful, you can turn on a setting called Real View Picture-in-Picture. And this now lets you use the pass-through functionality to be able to see your surroundings, but still be able to see the drone feed on the top left corner of the screen to keep an eye on the drone itself. Now to enable this, you want to bring up the left menu by pushing right on the joystick on the goggles, go down to Settings, and then go down to Display. At the bottom, you will see an option called Enable Real View Picture-in-Picture, and with this setting turned on, now when you tap twice on the left side of the goggles, not only will you be able to see the feed from the cameras on the goggles themselves, but you will also be able to see the drone feed on the top left corner. And you can bring up the drone video feed full frame again by simply tapping twice on the right side of the goggles. Now in this display settings menu, you will also see an option called Real View, where you can select between 2D and 3D. By default, this is set to 2D, which means the real view image you see when you tap on the side of the goggles will be in 2D. However, if you change this setting to 3D, now the view you see from the cameras on the front of the goggles will be in a three-dimensional view, and this is achieved by merging the feed from each of the two front-facing cameras together. Now, unfortunately, I can't capture what this is like on a screen recording, but the only way I could describe it is it's like wearing 3D glasses at the cinema and allows you to get a better depth perception when using this view. It's more like you can actually see through the goggles rather than looking at screens inside the goggles. Just be aware though that if you set it to this 3D option, you can't use the flight live view on the screen at the same time. Now, something that I have found can happen if you are wearing the goggles on a warm day, especially if you have them up on your forehead for a while you're working with the drone, is that the eyepieces themselves can get fogged up. Well, luckily with the Goggles 3, there is a new defog feature. So if you bring up the left settings menu again, press Settings, again go down to Display, you will see a new option called Goggles Defog. Now when you press this, the cooling fans within the goggles will continually run at a high speed, and this will help prevent them eyepieces from fogging up. Now, ND filters are important when flying FPV, because generally you're flying fast, low to the ground, and flying close past obstacles, and so you want to use these to be able to get motion blur. Well, there are a few things you should know about the new Avata 2 ND filters. Firstly, they have a new design and have these clips on the top and bottom. Now this makes these much easier to put on compared to the first generation Avata. The ND filters that came with the first generation Avata were quite awkward to put on, and generally you had to press on the glass itself to be able to clip them into place, ending up with you having to clean fingerprints off them every time you were fitting them to the drone. Well, because of these clips on the new ND filters, you don't actually need to touch the glass to put them on. These clips also make the filters much easier to take off, and again this is quite awkward with the original Avata. Something that's also nice is that the gimbal guard can be fitted to the Avata 2 with an ND filter attached, so you don't need to take the ND filters off to put that gimbal guard on. Now, if you have lots of ND filters for the original Avata, you might be wondering, can you use these on the Avata 2? And unfortunately, the answer is no. They are slightly too small, and when placed in front of the Avata 2 camera, they are loose and don't click into place. So you will need to purchase new ND filters for the Avata 2. Now just quickly, if you're getting value from this video, please let me know by giving me the thumbs up and clicking that like button down below. And if you love all things drones, but also action cameras, gimbals and more, and want to learn about the best settings to get up and running quickly, along with tips and tricks to help you get more cinematic videos and better looking images with your gear, then please consider subscribing by clicking that subscribe button down below. And when you're down there, be sure to check the notification bell so that you will be alerted when my new videos are released. It would be greatly appreciated. Now, staying on the topic of filters, something that's very important to check, and I speak from experience, is that if you have a crash with an ND filter attached, whenever you recover your drone, you want to make sure that the ND filter is still attached. If you have a fairly hard impact, the ND filter can actually pop off. And generally, when you have a crash, you're quite flustered, you're in a panic. Something you might not check or remember to check is to see if the ND filter is still attached when you recover your drone. So if you do crash the Avata 2 with a filter attached, always remember to check once you've found the drone that ND filter is still attached to the camera, so that you don't end up getting home or back to your office and only then realizing that the filter has fallen off the drone when it crashed. Now, traditionally, the way you navigate around the setting menus within the goggles is either using the joystick on the goggles or the touchpad on the goggles. But with the Goggles 3 and the DJI Avata 2, there's actually a new way to navigate around the settings menus, and that's using the AR cursor. Now, if the Avata 2 is on the ground before takeoff, or if when you're flying you press the lock button to pause the flight and have it hover in place, you will see a new AR cursor appear on the screen. And using the Motion Controller 3, you can now move this AR cursor around the screen to hover over any settings, and you can click into each setting by pulling the trigger, and you can use this new method to adjust the settings within the goggles. Now, something I have found very handy using the Avata 2 over the past couple of weeks is these two cutouts on the center of the drone. Now, when you're carrying the Avata 2 about, there's not much to grip onto on the top, and what this can mean is it might actually slip out of your hands when you're carrying it around. But if you put your fingers into these cutouts, you get a much secure grip of the drone itself, and this makes it much less likely that you will drop the Avata 2 when you're carrying it around. Now, by far, one of the most exciting new features of the Avata 2 is the new Easy Acro and Easy Drift mode. And these new modes allow you with one movement of the joystick to do 180 drifts, flips and rolls. But there are a few things that you should know about the new Easy Acro and Drift modes. Firstly, the new Easy Acro and Easy Drift modes do not work when you are in sport mode. So you must be in normal flight mode to use these two new modes. Also, the Easy Acro mode, that's the mode where you can do flips and rolls, becomes unavailable when the battery level is low. Also, you can't use the Easy Acro mode if you are too close to the ground. The drone actually prevents you from doing flips and rolls in this scenario. And that's because the drone actually loses a little bit of altitude as it's doing a flip or roll. So this is a safety measure to make sure as the drone does a flip or a roll, it doesn't actually clip the ground. Now, if you're looking to ascend or descend the Avata 2, there are two ways you can do this. Firstly, you can push the joystick upwards to ascend the drone, or you can pull it downwards to descend the drone. But something you might not know is that if you tilt the joystick backwards or tilt it downwards, you will see these two icons. So looking up, you will see an up arrow icon, and if you hover the cursor over this and pull the trigger inwards, the drone will ascend straight up. Or if you point the motion controller downwards, you will see a downwards arrow appear, and if you point the cursor over this and pull the trigger, the Avata 2 will descend straight downwards. Now, by default, if you're flying the Avata 2 around and you lose signal, return to home will automatically engage. And when this engages, the drone will rise up into the air, fly back to above where you took it off from, and automatically land. Now this is great if you're flying in a wide open area, but if you're flying somewhere like a forest where there's trees, or you're flying in an environment where there are lots of obstacles, it might not actually be a good idea to have the drone rise up as it's returning to home, as you don't want it to rise up into trees, for example, if you're flying in a forest. Well, the good news is that you can actually change what happens when you lose signal to the drone. So again, if you bring up the left settings menu and go down to settings and then go into safety, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you will see an option called advanced safety settings. Now when you press into this, you will see an option called aircraft signal lost action. And here you have three options: return to home, land, or hover. Now if you change this to hover, whenever you lose signal to the drone, it will simply come to a stop and hover in place. And this might be a good idea if you are flying in a forest, because then the drone won't rise up into them trees, it will just hover in place and you can simply walk closer to it, regain signal and continue flying. Or you can change this to land, and this time when you lose signal, the drone will automatically land on the ground. So it's worth changing this setting depending on the environment you are flying in. So hopefully now you have learned something new about the DJI Avata 2 that you didn't know before, a feature, setting or mode that will really improve your flying experience. Now, if you want to learn even more about the DJI Avata 2 and the main differences between it and the first generation Avata, then here is a video going over all the differences between the first generation Avata and the new Avata 2 that I highly recommend checking out by clicking up here or by clicking the link in the description down below.